Chapter 7. This wasn't me provoking them. Eren gave a wry smile and carefully recounted the events in a way that downplayed the risks, following Uncle Yuan's guidance. As expected, Seventh Uncle's expression darkened with rage as he listened. How dare they? The old man's claw-like hand slammed down on the redwood table before him, shattering it into splinters with a deafening crack. The sound startled Eren, making him jump. He stared in disbelief at the frail-looking elder, unable to reconcile the image of the feeble old man with the sheer destructive force he had just witnessed. Even the others in the room flinched, falling silent like frightened quails. Finally, Uncle Yuan spoke up. Seventh Uncle, please calm down. Those people have been eyeing Chinatown for a long time. There's no need to get worked up and risk your health. HMPH. Seventh Uncle snorted. The foundation our ancestors built will not fall into the hands of outsiders while I'm alive. His sharp, hawk-like eyes turned toward the three bruised and bound men in the center of the room, fixing them with a glare that could have flayed them alive. Yuan Li, deal with these three and send the Shui Gui gang a warning, Seventh Uncle commanded. Let them know that Chinatown is ours. Yes. Uncle Yuan barked in acknowledgement and signaled for a few men hauled the three captives out. After they left, Seventh Uncle's fury subsided somewhat. He turned his gaze to Eren, his tone now colder. Out of respect for Yuan Li, Zhang Yi Hall will take on this trouble for you. But since you brought this matter to us, you must show some gratitude. As the leader of Zhang Yi Hall, Seventh Uncle had seen through Eren and Uncle Yuan's plan from the start. However, as Uncle Yuan had pointed out, Chinatown was their turf, and no self-respecting Chinese gang would allow outsiders to encroach on it. Still, while he was willing to give Uncle Yuan face, Eren wouldn't get off without contributing something in return. Eren wasn't surprised by this demand. Zhang Yi Hall wasn't a charity, and he wasn't naive enough to expect a free ride. Please, Seventh Uncle, guide me, Eren replied solemnly. Seventh Uncle's eyes glimmered with approval. Good. I like smart people. I'll give you two options. First, join Zhang Yi Hall. If you're one of us, the hall will back you fully, and no one will question it. Second, if you don't want to be part of a gang, pay $100,000. That will cover the cost of our intervention. After Yuan Li warns the Shui Gui gang, you'll have some peace for a while. And as long as you stay in Chinatown, Zhang Yi Hall will ensure your safety. Having said his piece, Seventh Uncle sipped his tea and waited for Eren's decision. Eren didn't hesitate. Joining Zhang Yi Hall was out of the question. Although the hall wasn't particularly powerful, its strict hierarchy made it an unsuitable environment for someone like him. Even if he wanted to dabble in gang life, Zhang Yi Hall wouldn't be his first choice. I'll take the second option, Eren said decisively. Seventh Uncle nodded, unsurprised but slightly regretful. Fine. Have the money ready in 3 days. I'll send someone to collect it. With that, the conversation ended. Seventh Uncle lost interest in continuing the discussion and waved Eren off. Stepping out of Zhang Yi Hall, Eren felt a mixture of relief and pain. The $100,000 protection fee was a heavy blow to his finances, cutting his wealth in half. Still, safety was worth far more to him than money. Shortly after leaving, Eren's phone rang. It was Uncle Yuan. Kid, just sit tight. Once we warn those cowardly Shui Gui gang scumbags, they won't dare touch you. Relax, ha ha ha. Before Eren could respond, he heard the muffled sounds of shouting and pleading on the other end of the line. Shut up, you cowards. Uncle Yuan barked at someone off-screen before returning to the call. All right, I've got my hands full. Talk later. The call ended abruptly. Well, that's an unexpected bonus, Eren muttered, pocketing his phone with a smile. He had prepared himself for a hellish start in this world but found himself pleasantly surprised by the twists of fate. First Pepper Potts, now Zhang Yi Hall, they were all playing in his favor. After leaving Zhang Yi Hall, Eren treated himself to a simple breakfast at a nearby noodle shop and called Pepper to reassure her of his safety. A short while later, he spotted Uncle Yuan and 30 men from Zhangyi Hall piling into 5 vans and driving off in a hurry. Curious, Eren hailed a taxi and followed them. At first, the driver refused, unwilling to take such a suspicious fare. But when Eren flashed $500 in cash, the man quickly changed his tune, promising not to lose sight of the vans. Half an hour later, they arrived outside a bar near the docks. Eren watched as the men from Zhangyi Hall stormed into the establishment, their movements swift and deliberate. Looking at the sign above the entrance, Eren noted the bar's name, Morning Star. Morning Star. Is this their base of operations? Memorizing the name and location, Eren instructed the taxi driver to head back. For a seer, after all, battle wasn't limited to the physical realm. Returning to Chinatown, Eren immediately found a new, anonymous motel and checked in under a pseudonym. The ease with which Zhangyi Hall had located him earlier left him feeling uneasy. If they could find him so quickly, who's to say the Shui Gui gang couldn't do the same? End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 8. Evening was settling over the docks, gradually silencing the bustle of the day. Shops began flipping their signs to closed, but certain establishments remained lit, their neon signs flickering against the encroaching night. For workers who had spent the day laboring at the docks, there were 2 common options: head home in small groups or unwind with friends at a nearby bar. It was in this environment that numerous budget-friendly bars sprang up around the docks. Among them was Morning Star, a bar controlled by the Shui Gui gang. The dockworkers knew the bar's affiliation but turned a blind eye as long as the drinks stayed cheap. In fact, there was an odd reassurance about gang-controlled bars: trouble rarely started within their walls. Typically, 2 burly men in dark jackets stood watch outside the bar, their presence a clear warning. But not tonight. Hey, where's the usual muscle? A group of regulars muttered as they approached the door. Shrugging off their unease, they pushed the door open. What they saw inside froze them in their tracks. The dim, vibrant lighting of the bar danced over a chilling tableau. Dozens of people lay scattered across the floor, seemingly asleep. But their chests didn't rise or fall. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows, heightening the oppressive atmosphere. An inexplicable dread settled over the onlookers, their instincts screaming at them to leave. But just as they began to back away, they heard faint, incomprehensible whispers. The whispers carried an unnatural cadence, stirring a primal anger in their hearts. Their heads pounded with the urge to scream and lash out at anyone nearby. Within moments, the group succumbed to their violent impulses, turning on one another in a brutal frenzy. Minutes later, the Morning Star bar returned to an eerie calm. The only sound was the haunting music that continued to play. If one looked closely, they would see that 3 new bodies now joined the original group on the floor. The bar's slightly ajar door seemed like the gaping maw of an abyss, swallowing anyone who crossed its threshold. No one noticed anything amiss at the Morning Star bar until someone called the police. The situation quickly escalated, drawing the attention of the NYPD. Meanwhile, at Zhangyi Hall, 7th Uncle began to worry when Yuan Li and his men failed to return or answer their phones. Sensing trouble, he sent another team to investigate. When they arrived at Morning Star, the scene stunned them. The bar and its surroundings were cordoned off by dozens of police officers. The perimeter stretched a full 50 meters, marked with bright yellow caution tape. What's going on? The 5 Chinese youths sent by Zhangyi Hall gaped at the scene. The Shui Gui gang's bar is surrounded by cops. Did Yuan Li and his men get into a fight with them? Maybe the commotion was so big it drew the police. That could be it. Yuan Li brought 30 men with him, no way the Shui Gui gang could take them all. Maybe the cops swooped in and arrested everyone. You two, go ask around. The rest of us will call 7th Uncle and have him reach out to the police. If Yuan Li and the others were arrested, we'll need to get lawyers to bail them out. No one informed Eren about what happened at Morning Star until the next day. When Zhang Yihao finally called him, the news was grim. Uncle Yuan and his team had gone missing. Rushing to the hall, Eren immediately noticed something was off. The usual bustling atmosphere was gone, replaced by an oppressive gloom. Those who remained seemed distracted, their expressions vacant. As Eren entered, a wave of inexplicable sadness and anxiety washed over him, dragging his mood down. What's going on? Sensing the anomaly, Eren paused and activated spirit vision. The change was immediate. His surroundings lit up with the emotional auras of those present. The colors were dark and muted, blending into a nearly solid shadow that hung over the hall like a shroud of despair. Eren found Seventh Uncle in his usual spot, but the old man looked visibly drained. His meticulously combed silver hair was slightly disheveled, and his face bore the weight of exhaustion. As Eren approached, Seventh Uncle glanced up briefly before muttering, "Yuan Li and his men are in trouble." "What happened?" Eren asked. "Morning Star has a problem," Seventh Uncle replied gravely. "Since yesterday, anyone who's gone in hasn't come out, not even the cops. I've heard rumors of strange occurrences. The NYPD has sealed off the area, and the case has reportedly been handed over to the FBI." Eren's pupils shrank. Strange occurrences. What does that even mean? This was Marvel, not some supernatural horror universe. Seventh Uncle, mistaking Eren's reaction for ignorance, sighed in disappointment. The Shui Gui gang situation had started with Eren, and Seventh Uncle had hoped he might know more. But clearly, his expectations had been misplaced. After a moment of silence, Eren asked, "Is Uncle Yuan alive?" "No one knows," Seventh Uncle admitted, shaking his head. "The cops say there are over 100 people trapped inside the bar, but no one can confirm if they're alive or dead. If you want more details, you'll have to investigate yourself. The case is out of my hands now, it belongs to the FBI." Eren nodded grimly. "I understand. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 9. After saying goodbye to his seventh uncle, Eren hailed a taxi and headed straight to the street where the Morningstar bar was located. By the time Eren arrived near the bar, it was already noon. The sky was clear, and the sun shone brightly. Yet, as Eren stepped into the street where the Morningstar bar was, an inexplicable chill ran down his spine. At the same time, 2 sharply dressed men, one with a receding hairline, also arrived at the entrance of the Morningstar bar. They were Coulson and Grant Ward. "So, this is the suspicious bar. Doesn't look all that special," Ward remarked, glancing at the building. "Don't let your guard down, Grant. The NYPD already lost officers here," Coulson warned, taking a specialized protective suit handed to him by a nearby staff member and beginning to put it on. Grant Ward followed suit, donning the protective gear and arming himself to the teeth. Once ready, they followed behind a tactical team, cautiously approaching the bar's entrance. When the team pushed open the doors, a wave of serene music spilled out, growing louder as the door opened. Inside, the bar's main hall was filled with people lying scattered across the floor. They looked as if they had fallen into a deep sleep, unmoving. Coulson signaled the team forward. The tactical team leader led his unit into the bar. As nothing abnormal immediately occurred, a flicker of doubt crossed Coulson's eyes. Outside, Ward, who was monitoring the situation, found himself unknowingly moving forward, drawn by the bar's music. Step by step, he approached the entrance. "Grant!" Coulson's sharp shout came through the earpiece. The loud rebuke startled Ward back to his senses. He realized he was already standing at the bar's threshold, his foot raised to step inside. Cold sweat drenched his back. "Fall back!" Coulson's voice barked again. Without hesitation, Ward retreated rapidly, stopping only when he was several meters away from the door. Exhaling deeply, Ward cast a wary glance at the bar. Its inviting lights and soothing music should have made it a place of comfort, but now it seemed like a den of horror. The brief lapse in his judgment sent a wave of unease coursing through him. As a professionally trained agent, he had still been compelled to follow the tactical team, against all reason. "What happened just now?" Coulson demanded, approaching Ward. "It was the music," Ward said grimly. "The sound interfered with my willpower, like hypnosis. If not for your shout snapping me out of it, I don't know what would have happened." The memory of his altered state sent chills down Ward's spine. To be controlled so easily, by mere sound, was terrifying. He couldn't help but imagine the potential danger if the music manipulated him further or even exposed his allegiance to Hydra. Such a revelation would mean doom for both himself and his family. Ward's growing fear turned into deep dread toward the unassuming bar. Music. Hypnosis. Coulson's eyes lit up as he considered this revelation. Could the strange occurrences at the Morningstar bar be linked to its music? Were all the people inside hypnotized by the sound, rendering them unresponsive to the outside world? Just then, something inside the bar changed. The people lying across the floor all suddenly turned their heads in unison, some twisting their necks a full 180 degrees, adopting grotesque poses to face the entrance. And then, they smiled. A sea of twisted, lifeless smiles fixed on Coulson. He felt his skin crawl and cold sweat soaked his back. The synchronized grins etched into those pallid faces were utterly unnatural. Without hesitation, Coulson began retreating, stepping back until he was over 10 meters away. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, his breath uneven. As someone well versed in human anatomy, he knew no living person could twist their necks to such angles. If they weren't alive, then what were they? Ward's grim voice broke Coulson's thoughts. "Sir, we've lost contact with the tactical team." Coulson snapped his head toward the bar's door. Through the crack, he could see the team they had sent in now lying amongst the others inside, their faces frozen in those same eerie grins. "This is bad," Coulson muttered. Meanwhile, amidst the crowd behind the police barricade, Eren received a notification from the Scales of Fate. Ding! A foreign fate singularity has been detected. The forbidden item, Moonlight DJ, is disrupting the world's fate line. Capturing this item could yield significant fate points and unlock the ability to manifest fate. It is strongly recommended to contain this item. Ding! The Scales of Fate have captured methods to contain the forbidden item, Moonlight DJ, as follows. Method 1. A demigod-level transcendent can temporarily ignore the traits of Moonlight DJ by leveraging their divinity and forcibly contain the item. Method 2. Use the forbidden item, Silent Box, to neutralize the traits of Moonlight DJ, and then contain it. Method 3. Under Moonlight, sing along with Moonlight DJ, to achieve the accomplishment, every moonlit night reminds me of you, temporarily containing the item. Of course, this depends on your singing not being too terrible. Method 4. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 3 comments 0 vote. Chapter 10. Listening to the prompt from the Scales of Fate in his mind, Eren's thoughts were flooded with question marks. Were these containment methods serious? If he had the strength described in Method 1, he wouldn't be hiding from gangsters, constantly on the run like this. As for the forbidden item Silent Box mentioned in Method 2, he hadn't even heard of it, let alone used it to contain Moonlight DJ. Method 3 seemed somewhat feasible. But judging by the current situation at the Morningstar bar, Eren estimated that he'd be done for before even getting close to Moonlight DJ. And besides, the bar was now surrounded by cops, how could he even get inside? Wait a second. That man giving orders, wasn't he Coulson from S.H.I.E.L.D.? With that iconic receding hairline, there was no way Eren could mistake him. Could it be that the situation at the Morningstar bar had drawn Shield's attention? If that were the case, wouldn't it be even harder for Eren to secure the forbidden item inside? No. Eren shook his head. If he took a calculated risk, it might not be impossible. Forbidden items weren't native to this world, so the SHIELD agents were probably scratching their heads trying to figure out how to deal with this situation. With that thought, Eren took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He began pushing his way through the crowd of onlookers. As the commotion caused by Eren's movements spread, a young patrol officer in his 20s shouted, "This is an active crime scene. No pushing. Everyone, stay back. Hey, you. Yes, you. Didn't you hear me? Stop pushing." Ignoring the officer's warning, Eren squeezed up to him and said, "Officer, could you please call over Agent Coulson?" The one holding the radio, with the receding hairline. Huh. The young officer, who had been ready to reprimand Eren, frowned slightly upon hearing Coulson's name. Could this guy actually know Agent Coulson? After a moment's hesitation, the officer said, "I can call him, but I can't guarantee he'll agree to see you." "Thank you. Oh, and you might want to mention that I have intel about the issue inside the bar." Eren gestured toward the Morningstar bar as he spoke. "Intel about the bar? If what you're saying is true, I think the agent will want to meet you." Of course. Convinced that Eren wasn't bluffing, the young officer ran over to Coulson. "He claims to have intel about the situation inside the bar." Coulson glanced at the young man in the crowd, then nodded to the officer. "Bring him here." Standing nearby, Ward frowned. "You really think that kid knows anything?" Coulson smiled faintly. "Meeting him won't waste much of our time, and it's better than losing lives to gather information ourselves. Who knows? He might actually know something useful." Soon enough, the young officer brought Eren to Coulson. Instead of immediately asking about the Morningstar bar, Coulson first inquired, "What's your name?" "I'm Eren." "Well, Eren, how exactly do you know my name?" "I don't recall ever meeting you." Coulson fixed Eren with an unwavering stare, watching his micro-expressions carefully. "That's correct, you don't know me now. But in the future, you will. As you can see, I'm a diviner. Your name came to me during a reading." "A diviner?" Coulson's mind filled with question marks. Beside him, Ward shrugged with a knowing look, as if to say, "I expected as much." Even Coulson seemed a bit exasperated. "All right, my little fortune teller, I'm not in the mood for games. If you actually know something about this strange bar, spill it. If not, you're free to leave. You wouldn't want to be charged with obstructing justice by the NYPD, would you?" Eren wasn't intimidated by Coulson's subtle threat. He nodded earnestly. "Of course, I wouldn't waste your time if I didn't have real information. However, every successful divination comes at a cost. So." He held up his right hand and rubbed his fingers together, making the universal gesture for money. Ward's expression darkened. Great. A con artist daring to scam SHIELD, he must have a death wish. Clenching his fists, Ward raised an eyebrow at Eren. "Hey, kid, has anyone ever told you that you've got a lot of nerve?" Before Ward could finish, Eren interrupted, $100,000. "For that price, I'll share what I've divined. Considering the payout for a federal soldier's death benefit, you'd still come out ahead. This time, I'm being sincere. $100,000 wasn't much to the wealthy, but it was no small amount either. Most families in the country couldn't scrape together that kind of money." To Coulson, it sounded like highway robbery. But, as Eren pointed out, from a certain perspective, it wasn't entirely unreasonable. A single soldier's death benefit would cost several times more. If Eren's intel truly helped with this operation, the cost might even be worth it. Still, Coulson wasn't about to let himself be taken advantage of without trying to negotiate. 100,000 is no small amount. Before Coulson could finish, Eren cut him off. "Fate doesn't offer discounts. The price is non-negotiable. If you think it's too steep, I'll leave now." Coulson. Fine. But your information had better be worth it. Otherwise, crossing a law enforcement agency is a mistake you'll deeply regret. Ward, meanwhile, cocked his rifle slightly and sneered. Coulson, you're too kind. If his information leads to casualties, he'll be facing prison time. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 11. Grant Ward's obvious threat elicited only a calm smile from Eren, who casually added, "Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, the $100,000 is after tax." Coulson. Grant Ward. As the largest and most heavy-handed law enforcement agency in the Federation, the Federal Tax Bureau was infamous for its aggressive taxation. That $100,000 would lose at least $20,000 to taxes. Eren's cheeky remark effectively increased SHIELD's costs even further. Ward's face darkened, and he opened his mouth to retort, but Coulson quickly raised a hand to stop him. The last thing he wanted was for this shrewd kid to raise the price even more. Fine, Coulson said, taking a deep breath. You've got a deal. Now, tell us what you know. No problem. Eren shrugged. From what I know, the situation at the Morningstar bar is caused by a forbidden item. Seal that item, and the bar will return to normal. Forbidden item? Coulson's brow furrowed. What exactly is it? What does it do, and how do we seal it? Forbidden items are relics left behind by demons, taboos of the world. Each one has unique abilities. The forbidden item in the Morningstar bar is sound-based. It can hypnotize, pollute, and control living beings within a certain range through its music. Find the source of the music, and you'll find the item. Relics of demons. Coulson had never heard of such things before. Though skeptical, he couldn't deny that Eren's description aligned with their earlier suspicions. Ward's near-hypnotic experience had already pointed to the bar's music being the key to its strangeness. For now, Eren's information seemed credible. Eren then added gravely, as for sealing it, I suggest you deploy a bomber to carpet bomb the Morningstar bar. Destroy the item physically, fast, safe, and effective. The forbidden item Moonlight DJ, as described by the Scales of Fate, wasn't particularly powerful. Eren wasn't sure if such a method would work, but if it did, it might open new possibilities for dealing with similar items in the future. Of course, he also knew Coulson would never go for such a plan. Predictably, Coulson immediately dismissed the suggestion. Not a chance. This wasn't some chaotic Middle Eastern war zone, it was New York, one of the most developed cities in the Federation. Using a bomber here would lead to a public outcry that could destroy S.H.I.E.L.D. overnight. Eren simply shrugged. In that case, we wait. Wait. For what? The moon. Moonlight is key to sealing this item. Until then, you'd best lock down the area and disperse the crowd. The more people enter the bar, the stronger the forbidden item becomes. The notion that the forbidden item grew stronger with more people caused Coulson's expression to tighten. I understand. I'll ensure the area is cleared. But why wait for moonlight? Why can't we act now? Coulson glanced up at the overcast New York sky. It was only midday, there were still hours to go before the moon appeared. Was he really supposed to just sit around and wait? As night fell and the moon rose, S.H.I.E.L.D. had surrounded the Morningstar bar with a massive tarp, concealing it entirely. This not only prevented news from leaking and causing panic but also provided cover for the next phase of their operation. Even the surrounding buildings had been evacuated under the pretext of a gas leak. Inside a surveillance van parked near the bar, Coulson sat before a desk piled with detailed reports. On top of the stack was a file bearing Eren's name and a photograph. During the hours they'd been waiting, Coulson had thoroughly investigated Eren's background. According to the file, Eren had been an unremarkable high school student. None of this matched the confident and enigmatic figure he'd encountered today. The file also revealed that Eren had recently clashed with the Water Ghost gang, which owned the Morningstar bar. 2 days ago, the gang had kidnapped Eren and the daughter of the NYPD commissioner. Somehow, the two had escaped, triggering a crackdown on the gang by both the police and City Hall, with Pepper Potts exerting influence. Was Eren here to get revenge on the gang? Wait, why had the gang kidnapped him in the first place? Could the strange events at the Morningstar bar be connected to Eren? If so, the entire situation might have a very different explanation. Coulson closed the file and stepped out of the van. It was time to speak with Eren again. Meanwhile, Eren had returned to the bar after a brief trip to Chinatown, where he'd bought some snacks and eaten a burger and fries. The moment they met, Coulson got straight to the point. What's the next step? In 30 minutes, at midnight, the forbidden item will reach its peak power, and also its most vulnerable state. That's when you can try to retrieve it and seal it. How do we seal it? Coulson asked. Eren spread his hands and shrugged. That's up to you. Sealing dangerous forbidden items wasn't part of our original deal. Before Coulson could react, Eren continued with a sly grin, but, as a personal favor to you, I can help seal it. In return, you'll owe me a favor. Coulson hesitated, then nodded. Deal. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 12. Well then, let's begin. Containing the forbidden item Moonlight DJ was Eren's main goal all along. Securing a favor from Coulson on top of that. A delightful bonus. More importantly, this was Eren's perfect excuse to contain Moonlight DJ openly and without suspicion. A few minutes later, a tactical team equipped with advanced soundproofing technology charged into the bar, led by Grant Ward. Once inside, the operatives immediately fired large net guns, ensnaring the dozens of seemingly entranced individuals sprawled across the bar's main hall. Meanwhile, others unleashed their weapons on every object capable of producing sound, leaving nothing untouched. Unlike ordinary objects, forbidden items are notoriously resilient. Not even gunfire could damage them. But this was precisely the straightforward method Eren had taught them to identify a forbidden item. Anything that remained unscathed was suspect. Outside the Morningstar bar, Eren listened to the relentless gunfire echoing from within and silently reflected. Good thing S.H.I.E.L.D. was paving the way as the sucker. Without their resources, Eren had no idea how long it would have taken him to secure Moonlight DJ alone. Shortly after the gunfire subsided, Ward emerged from the bar alongside 2 heavily armed soldiers, shielding another operative carrying an old-fashioned record player. Behind them, an ominous, human tide surged toward the bar's exit. The moment Ward cleared the threshold, he signaled to Coulson. In response, Coulson pressed a remote switch. With a loud crash, massive iron cages dropped around the bar's entrances and windows, slamming down with brutal force. Several figures attempting to escape were crushed, their bodies horrifyingly torn in half as the cages sealed the building. The sight of their well-laid trap springing into action prompted Ward to flip a middle finger at the struggling horde behind him. Idiots, he muttered. Still, his grim mood lingered. Despite their precautions and equipment to block the effects of the sound, the mission inside the bar had claimed 5 members of his elite 8-person team. The loss stung. Watching the frenzied crowd relentlessly hurl themselves against the barriers, Coulson asked, his face dark with concern, will sealing the forbidden item fix these people? Eren looked at the chaos, noting familiar faces among the crowd, including members of the Triad faction. His expression dimmed as he shook his head. I don't know. Truthfully, Eren hoped that once Moonlight DJ was sealed, its victims would recover. But this was his first direct encounter with a forbidden item, and he had no guarantees. Seeing Coulson's grim expression, Eren pointed to the soundproofing gear and said quickly, I suggest you wear this. If the forbidden item controls you, don't blame me for not warning you. Without waiting for a response, Eren busied himself putting on the layered soundproof equipment Coulson had prepared. When he finished, he turned to find Coulson already fully geared up. This sly old fox. Through hand signals, Ward's team positioned the old record player at the spot Eren had specified. Everything was ready. Now, it was up to Eren. Under the watchful eyes of Coulson and the others, Eren took a deep breath. Then, he carefully placed 3 windproof candles around the record player in a triangular formation. At each corner, he scattered tulip, lavender, and lilac petals. Once the preparations were complete, Eren began to sing. If I Were a DJ. Eren's voice carried surprisingly well, and as the song ended, the forbidden item Moonlight DJ abruptly stopped playing. A soft click sounded, as though it had surrendered to the melody. In that moment, Eren felt a strange sensation wash over him, a distinct awareness that he had succeeded. Simultaneously, the scales of fate in his mind quivered. A vortex in the river of fate smoothed out, and ripples of energy surged into the scales. Ding! The host has successfully contained the forbidden item Moonlight DJ, resolving the fate singularity. You have gained 1000 fate points. Ding! Fate manifestation unlocked. Hearing the notifications, Eren finally allowed himself to relax. It's done. His tightly wounded nerves eased, and he glanced around. Coulson and the others were still positioned defensively around him, their faces tense. Fortunately, their soundproof gear prevented them from hearing anything, sparing Eren from any awkward explanations. In the distance, the crowd controlled by Moonlight DJ collapsed in unison the moment the item was contained. With the forbidden item's power gone, they fell like puppets whose strings had been cut. Seeing this, Ward's eyes widened. What just happened? Did the containment actually work? Even Coulson turned to Eren, curiosity and doubt flickering across his face. As seasoned agents, both Coulson and Ward had harbored suspicions about Eren's claims, his supposed divination abilities and his knowledge of forbidden items. But now, with the undeniable results before them, their skepticism began to waver. If Eren truly had prophetic abilities, his value would skyrocket. To Coulson, he was suddenly a prime candidate for recruitment into S.H.I.E.L.D. On the other hand, Ward, a Hydra operative, couldn't help but see Eren as a potential asset for his own organization. Still, both men knew more observation was needed before making a move. Unaware of their thoughts, Eren finally exhaled, his eyes scanning the fallen crowd. Only now did he truly feel the weight lift from his shoulders. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 13. Eren swept an inconspicuous glance at the fallen crowd, then began removing the soundproof equipment strapped to his body, letting his hearing return to normal. Seeing this, Coulson and the other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents followed suit, taking off their gear. Much better, Coulson said with a faint smile. He pointed to the old-fashioned record player behind Eren and asked, "So, does this mean the containment was successful?" Eren turned to look at the record player and nodded. "It's contained for now. However, my abilities are limited, so I can't guarantee how long the containment will last. If you want to avoid future incidents, I suggest constructing a completely soundproof space to store it." A soundproof space, huh? Noted. Coulson nodded thoughtfully, then cast a troubled glance at the hundreds of people lying lifelessly in the Morningstar bar. "And what about them?" Eren shrugged. "I'm no doctor. If you want to help them, you could try sending them to a hospital." Before he could finish, a soldier in tactical gear approached Coulson and whispered, "Sir, the people inside the bar, including the team that went in earlier, none of them have a pulse." The words struck like a thunderclap. Eren, Coulson, and the others froze. "They're all dead." Eren sighed internally. So even Uncle Yuan didn't make it. Uncle Yuan, who had tried to help him, had left a positive impression on Eren. This crisis was indirectly caused by Eren, and part of his reason for cooperating with S.H.I.E.L.D. was to try to save Yuan. But in the end, he still failed. After a moment of silence, Coulson personally went to check on the people in the bar. To his shock, he found that not only were they without a pulse, but their bodies were unnaturally cold and rigid. If he hadn't witnessed it himself, Coulson might have believed these people had been dead for days. So this is what a forbidden item does, Coulson muttered grimly. In a single incident, over 100 casualties. If they hadn't acted quickly, the toll could have been even higher. Truly, a devil's relic. Eren, standing nearby, softly murmured, "The 1,000-year shift is upon us. The gears of fate have begun to turn. All that was hidden in history will soon resurface." Though Eren's voice was low, Coulson's sharp ears caught every word. Before Coulson could question him, Eren preemptively said, "So many people died here today. You've got your hands full, Agent Coulson. As for me, containing the forbidden item drained me. I need to rest." Without waiting for a response, Eren turned and left, his weary expression making it clear he had no intention of staying longer. Coulson hesitated. He wanted to stop Eren, to ask about what he'd just said. But the sight of the lifeless bodies sprawled across the bar pulled his attention back. Eren was right, there were more urgent matters at hand. Over an hour later, Eren finally managed to hail a taxi and relocated to a new place to stay. After carefully checking the room for any abnormalities, he took a deep breath and entered a meditative state. Moments later, Eren found himself once again in the space of the Scales of Fate. Standing before the scales, Eren summoned his personal fate panel. Name: Eren. Fate compass: 100 fate points required for one spin. Fate manifestation unlocks items from the River of Fate unlocked. Talent: unpredictable fate. Skills: driving beginner English 11th grade, history 11th grade, mathematics 11th grade, chemistry 11th grade, antique appraisal, novice programming advanced. Combat system: sequence 9, diviner. Strength evaluation: a novice with basic knowledge of the mystical arts. Fate points: 1000. The new section titled Combat System caught Eren's eye, likely a result of advancing to sequence 9 and consuming the diviner's potion. His strength evaluation had upgraded from complete amateur to novice, which wasn't much of an improvement. Moving on. Eren's gaze shifted to the 1000 fate points displayed on the panel. This was far more than the 100 fate points he'd started with as a newbie gift. With this amount, he could spin the fate compass 10 times. Additionally, the fate manifestation ability was now unlocked. However, after a brief review of the ability, Eren grimaced and dismissed it. Way too expensive. For instance, manifesting a simple Desert Eagle handgun cost 100 fate points. Advancing to the next potion, Clown, under the diviner sequence. A whopping 2000 fate points. Compared to that, spinning the fate compass felt like a much better deal. What's more, Eren didn't urgently need the clown potion, he had barely begun digesting the diviner potion. A series of 10 spins seemed far more appealing. With that decision, Eren activated the fate compass. A massive ethereal image of the compass appeared before him, spinning rapidly. Click. As the compass needle stopped, a white orb of light materialized before Eren. Instead of checking the reward immediately, Eren continued spinning. 9 more times, he drained all his fate points. When the compass vanished, 10 glowing orbs hovered before him, 1 purple, 1 blue, 2 green, and 6 white. The colors likely indicated the rarity or quality of the rewards. With a mix of curiosity and anticipation, Eren reached for the purple orb. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for +20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com Zaelum. +500 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. Next chapter. Mysteries on Marvel. Zaelum.